Inside Out. It's been out in America for, about a month now. I don't know about anywhere else in the world except here in the UK. It wasn't released until last Friday. I have no idea why they do it like that, especially with the internet, with piracy and people going online and just looking at illegal feeds. Can't help box office numbers in other parts of the world at all. Yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating, when I keep hearing so much stuff about how good this film is. Yeah, it is really good, I will say that much, first of all. I'm not quite sure if it's up there as one of Pixar's absolute best films ever. I mean, I think maybe people have gotten a bit sort of wound up in, the hype of the fact that it's a new film, and, it's the first film Pixar have made in 2 years. Yeah, and also it's undoubtedly the best film they've made since Toy Story 3 as well. I think that's maybe something in it as well. I'm definitely going to have to watch it again when it comes out on Blu-ray. Definitely going to get this on Blu-ray. Watch it again for myself, see if it is up there with the likes of, like Toy Story and WALL-E. It is definitely up there as one of their best. The absolute best they've made ever? Not sure about that at the moment. But anyway, I should probably just start actually talking about the film. So I remember seeing a teaser trailer for this about a year ago, or, about a year before it came out anyway. And I just remember sort of thinking to myself, I see what they're doing here, because the great Pixar films and great sort of family films in general, really, what they really, makes them work is just having a lot of high emotions running through your head, feeling very sad, feeling very happy, feeling very angry about different kinds of things, a lot of different emotions going this way and that, and, always sort of wanted to care about what is going to happen to these people and everything. That's the great thing that the Pixar films always do. They always make you care. And they just have these different emotions running through your head. So they're like, okay, well, here's an easy way to make sure that there are a lot of emotions going on in the film. Let's just have the film be about emotions. And I'm like, oh yeah, and also there's the big potential for, gags, like anger, The angry character is always the great sort of comic relief character, so let's have a character actually be anger, think of the jokes. I just thought that, they were just desperately looking for something that was going to be like the easy way out. It was going to be an easy way to make things work. It was kind of how I felt like about Cars, because I actually thought Cars, when I heard about it, might be kind of a creative idea, but it was just sort of an attempt at creating gags everywhere. And it didn't really work in terms of, making gags out of everything. So I thought maybe they were going down the same route here. Here it was emotions rather than cars. I don't really know why. It's cars, but with emotions. I don't know why I really thought of it like that those two don't really connect at all. I mean, with something like planes, it's kind of obvious. It's cars, but they're planes instead of cars. Emotions and cars aren't really connected in any kind of way, so I don't understand why I thought it like that. I just thought that it was going to be on the same kind of level as cars. This sort of shows what I know. I think the first, 10, 15 minutes or so, that in and of itself really could have been the whole film for me, because I just found the metaphors that they were working under, and every little sort of bit of, the human mind and the way that they had it work in this film, that in and of itself was just enough for me. That I found, really fascinating. Those little voices that you hear in your head, or certainly a lot of people sort of say that they hear in their heads, and it does sort of sound sometimes when you're having a lot of different emotions going through in your head and you're contemplating different things, it does almost sound like there are people inside your head arguing with one another. And that is actually what happens at one point in this film. It's like, God, that is exactly like the kinds of things that go on in your head. That's just perfectly fits it. And then, of course, the sort of idea that human thoughts sort of start out in kind of the front part of your brain and then they go to the back, as more time passes. I wasn't quite sure if this was what they were trying to say with the whole thing with, sadness touches a memory and it becomes sad. But I have often kind of thought to myself, things that you remember from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that was a happy memory. Over the course of time, if, equivalents of that memory or similar memories to that don't also come about on a more sort of regular basis, that memory is going to become more of a sort of sad memory, because it's depressing of how long ago that was. Like, for example, if you spend, a good weekend with some old friends, that's a happy memory at the time, but if you go, another year or a couple of years without ever seeing them again, that becomes kind of a sad memory, because it's kind of sad how long it's been since you've seen them. So I'm not quite sure if that's what they're trying to do with the whole idea of, when sadness touches a memory, it becomes sad, but if that is what they were going for, I think that's really clever. And of course, long-term memory, Again, I wasn't quite sure if this was what they were going for, but when you sort of look at it from a sort of helicopter kind of angle over the top, all those sort of bookshelf type things, it looks a bit like the human brain. And then the personality islands, of course. Actually, with the core memories, that was something I wasn't quite sure if that really worked in the way that I think it actually does work in the human mind. Because, to me, what should have happened with the core memories is they should have started out as just like regular memories, and then over the course of time, as more and more sort of similar memories to that started to emerge, and they became more sort of meaningful, and it became a sort of more sort of central part of the person's life and personality, then that original memory of that first sort of experience of it becomes a core memory over the course of time. I don't think it should start out as a core memory, because just like as an example, like you have a long-term partner or you're married or something. Did you know when you first met them that was who they were going to be? They were going to be your long-term partner? Probably not. Like if you're a fan of a big TV show or a sport or a film series or something, did you know the first time you saw that thing that it was going to be something you were going to become a big fan of? Again, no, probably not. Something that happens over the course of time. I wasn't quite sure if the core memory metaphor quite worked, but it was sort of still very sort of clever and very sort of true to, I think, the way the human mind works, with the idea that there are distinct key moments in your life that really define who you are. And the islands, they were just really good sort of to look at visually. I actually was kind of hoping when joy and hope, and joy and sadness even, went over to those islands. I was kind of hoping they were going to explore them a little bit more. I'm not quite sure if I actually remember a huge amount about what happened in sort of the middle portion. I think it's kind of weird to say, but I was just so engrossed and so sort of caring about what was going to happen to joy and sadness, and getting back to the little sort of bridge kind of area, I guess you could call it, that I don't even sort of remember thinking to myself, okay, well, does this work? Does this make sense? Is this important? I was just sort of mesmerised by it. I was just sort of, oh my god, are they going to get out of this situation? That's the brilliant thing that these Pixar films always seem to be able to do for me. They always make you care. They always make you sort of go, oh my god, what are they going to do? How are they going to get out of this situation? And feeling sort of mad and infuriated by what sadness was doing to sort of mess things up. You feel you're immersed in what's going on in the film. I mean, you kind of know in the back of your mind everything's going to work out, but you don't know how it's going to happen, and you're concerned for these characters. The brilliant thing that Pixar is always able to do. I'm not quite sure how they do it, but they always seem to manage to do it. Another reason actually why the teaser trailer did not engross me that much is because seems like kind of a weird thing to say about a family film, but it seemed a bit too brightly coloured to me. If you're watching this, you probably know that I'm a brony. When I first started watching My Little Pony, one thing that actually did kind of put me off a little bit when I first started watching it was how brightly coloured it was. And for a long time, I didn't really know why that was. It's like, well, why would it being brightly coloured irritate me? And I think maybe it's just the fact that it reminds you that this is something meant for kids. It just sort of makes you sort of think to myself, I shouldn't be watching this, I'm too old for this. It sort of felt like it was sort of much more of a kids' film than it really should be, or really needed to be. While the film is obviously really good, it doesn't change the fact that it is still sort of a brightly coloured film, and it maybe is still a little bit off-putting, but that's maybe just something that bothers me personally. It may not bother you. If you're someone who's the same age as me, it may not bother you in the same way. I think actually at the same time it also adds to the experience, because they're in a child's mind, so it makes sense for it to look more sort of like a child environment. But also the distinct colours of each of the emotions did make a lot of sense there. You could tell what each of them was just by looking at how they looked sort of visually. Sadness was blue. It's kind of a sort of metaphor for sadness, isn't it, in the colour blue. Anger is red, again, same kind of thing. And I actually sort of remember thinking when the film first started out, that actually there probably should be a lot more emotions, really. Like, I think curiosity should have been there, confusion or puzzlement. And hope, actually, was another one I really thought should have been in there. And then I read, after seeing the film, that they actually had plans to have 27 different emotions, and I'm like, that would not have worked. It would have been way too complicated. And again, this sort of goes back to what I said in my A Bug's Life review, that I think maybe Pixar have learnt something from A Bug's Life and the mistakes they made in that film, and that one of those is too many characters and not enough time to develop each of them individually. So, hence, there's only 5 characters in this film. And actually, I've heard some people have complained that even 5 characters is too many. I'm like, no, I don't see that. Especially since joy and sadness are sort of the 2 sort of central characters, and the other 3 are just sort of side characters for the most part of the film. Now the personality islands, that was something that puzzled me a little bit when I first saw that, because I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting, the way that the core memory just sort of goes into this sort of central sort of kind of gear thing, and from that, the personality island just emerges out of thin air. Shouldn't it more sort of develop over the course of time? Shouldn't more core memories need to go into it to make it sort of a larger kind of island? But I think maybe the reason why they did that is because it sort of shows how the personality as a whole is developing. It's not about each of the islands individually, it's more about just how they are as a group, and it shows sort of how complex or how defined a personality the person then has. But the thing that could have made that work better is having the personality islands perhaps also, as well as sort of being quite a complicated and big thing when they first emerged, I think would have been also having them grow over the course of time. I think it would have made more of an impact when, they lost their power and they fell. That was always sort of made out to be quite a big deal, but I was always sort of thinking to myself, when they fell, just put the core memories back into the gear and they'll just reform, like, we saw them do at the start of the film. So I felt they kind of, like, missed a trick a little bit there. The personality islands, it wasn't quite explained exactly how they work or why they were important exactly. Because, I thought at first that maybe if she lost all her personality islands, did that mean Riley was going to die? Or she was going to have, like, no personality? Or she was going to go into, like, suspended animation or something? Nothing really seemed to happen that much when the personality islands fell, other than the fact that she became more depressed. Because the other sort of metaphors that they have working around in this film, they work so well. That was one in particular that didn't quite work for me. I think the hockey island is the one case, I think, where it did kind of work, because with something like when you're talented at sport, I can sort of see how that could happen, how you could, like, the core memory being removed and no longer powering that island. That's kind of a metaphor for you just losing the ability to play hockey. Obviously, she doesn't realise she's lost the ability to play hockey until she actually tries to play hockey, and then Hockey Island falls and she gives up on playing hockey. It's basically what that's a metaphor for. So that kind of worked. The other ones, though, I wasn't quite sure what was exactly supposed to be going on or what that represented. I think this is also the first Pixar film where a non-villain character has actually died. I mean, you've got like Ellie at the beginning of Up, and you've got the wife in Finding Nemo, I forget her name. Those are kind of like more sort of plot points than actual sort of meaningful, important deaths, in terms of the actual story. They're more just sort of there to sort of push the story in a certain direction than it needs to go. Whereas here we have an actual character that we've gotten to know over quite a long period of time and has been part of the story for sort of a large part of it. Their death isn't there to sort of propel the story in a certain direction, it's there to sort of help the character move on in the direction that they were already going. So that to me is a much more sort of meaningful, much more important kind of death, and death that they didn't actually have to do, but they decided, we're going to do it because, it makes it a more sort of concrete and better kind of story, and makes it more important that Joy get back to the control room. And also, not making Sadness a villain. It would have been very easy to make Sadness a villain in this. Would make the ending a bit more difficult to get across. I suppose you would have to have reformed Sadness at the end. Is not a villain, because, Sadness is just a necessary... It's kind of interesting, actually, the way that sort of even Sadness herself does not really sort of understand exactly what she's there for or what she's supposed to do. Very sort of interesting approach that they take that, because if they'd made Sadness a villain, it would have made things a lot easier, really, to sort of explain who Sadness was and why she was there. But, they don't do that. They understand the sort of, you don't need this kind of necessity to have, like, a villainous character in every single film that you do. A couple of other sort of minor sort of nitpicks that I would have. There's one particular part when they're in long-term memory, when these guys, I'm not quite sure why, but they're sending these random memories back to the main control room. I guess that's kind of a metaphor for when random thoughts just sort of pop into your head. Why not just send the core memories back that way? Obviously the main thing you need to do here is get the core memories back into the control room to get them to power those island things that they have. Just send the core memories back that way and, you're sorted. I mean, Joy and Sadness are still out there in the long-term memory kind of area, but, they can find a way back, in their own time. Another minor thing irritating me a little bit is the fact that the dad's emotions are watching soccer or football while the wife is trying to get their attention. This film is set in they're from Minnesota and it's set in San Francisco, so it's quite clearly set in America. So why would the dad be watching soccer? It would make more sense really for him to be watching either baseball or football, American football, whatever, depending on what kind of part of the world you're in. Myself, especially since his daughter plays ice hockey, wouldn't he be more interested in watching ice hockey? The short before the film, Lava, kind of a neat idea and cute little kind of storyline. I could have done without the singing though. I think Pixar should probably leave the singing to Disney. I didn't really feel much of a connection with the human characters, but I guess you feel the connection with the human characters in terms of feeling a connection with their emotions, when you see them. So I felt a connection with their emotions. I didn't feel an emotional connection with the character themselves. If that makes any kind of sense, it probably doesn't, does it? The stuff that happens in the human world is just there to sort of show the results of what is going on inside Riley's head. Maybe it's not particularly important that I understand those characters or find those characters particularly interesting, like Andy in Toy Story. I never really felt much of a connection or found him particularly interesting or anything, but I wasn't supposed to. He was just there to serve a purpose, really. And the moral at the end is really, really clever, I think. And it's not a moral I don't think I've ever seen in any other film, family film or not. Having a bit of sadness in your life can actually help to propel you into a sort of more sort of happy and joyful kind of situation, sort of later on. I think basically it is hope. It's, joy and sadness combined is basically hope. It's like, however bad, the situation might have been, you can always sort of turn things around and make things better for you in the future. Sadness does sort of help give you that kind of motivation to try and, make things better later on in life. However bad things get in life, focus on trying to make things better. You kind of do need that sort of sadness to help sort of motivate you to push things forward and make your life better in the future. So I really like that. I don't think I've ever seen that moral done before. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if this is up there as one of Pixar's absolute best, but it is one of the best that they've done, if that makes any kind of sense. I'll definitely be getting this on Blu-ray when it comes out. Really good film. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Really emotionally invested, no pun intended, throughout the entire film. Really cared about absolutely everything that was happening, and just a thoroughly enjoyable experience, and up there with The Theory of Everything as one of the best films I've seen this year. Okay, so that's that, guys, and I will see you soon.